Today we stand at a crossroads in history. A polar shift from old world to new world. Now most people don't realize it yet, but as I write this, an event much bigger than ourselves unfolds. Over the last 13 years, the concept of what it means to be free has changed. You can have all the money in the world and still not be free, and that is why, long ago, I stopped chasing freedom. Instead, I seek sovereignty. We have all noticed it. There are a few people in this world who seem to have broken free from the norms. They don't have a traditional job, although they have more money than they know what to do with. They don't need vacations because they live life as if it's just one endless holiday. They don't have a single city to call home because the world is their home. It's almost as if the rules we live by don't apply to them. That, for me, is sovereignty. And this has been one of the biggest wake-up calls in life. And for you to come to this realization, I need to take you on the same journey through the history books that I took to get here. And this is how sovereign men are born.
Ready to go?
Let's do it.
Digital Sovereignty, Episode 1, Take 1.
It's true. We are currently standing at a crossroads in history, and the journey ahead is going to be radically different than the times we've experienced in our lifetimes, although similar to a few times before ours. How do I know that? Well, because they always have been. History has a funny way of repeating itself, and I've personally learned that the hard way. Over my career, every single big event that took me by surprise did so because it had never happened in my lifetime. And these painful surprises led me to study the rise and the fall of the most powerful empires of the last thousands of years, where I saw that these events have indeed happened before, many times, with the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire to the ancient Greeks to the Renaissance, and most recently, with the American Revolution. And every time that happened, it was a sign that an empire was about to fall and give place to another one, conquering its sovereignty. Now, as I said, the truth can't be told. It needs to be realized. Usually, you see me sitting in my office in Dubai giving you the 7 habits or the 5 money principles or the 3 things you should know, and not to say that those are not important. They are. However, it's only a little part of the equation. Those were the answers. What I haven't given you yet were the questions. The questions that led me to get to those answers in the first place. So today, I'm not here to give you the answers. Instead of me just sitting here and telling you what this new shift in eras is going to be, I'm here to take you on a journey with me. Listen, you have to go through the same epiphanies that I've personally gone through in order to understand how I got to these conclusions. I want to start off by beginning with a story. And that story brought me to this point, about how along my journey to sovereignty, I discovered that I didn't actually know what true freedom meant, and how throughout this journey, I came across 3 worldview changing questions, which, while seeking their answers, helped me redefine the concept of freedom and allowed me to build the life that I actually wanted to live. This is a journey on how I became sovereign and how you can too. December 26th, 2015. That was the day that I published my first YouTube video documenting my journey to success. I was 15. Back then, I didn't know much. But from the few things I knew, one thing I was certain about: I didn't want to live a normal life. I wanted to live a life worth living, a life of freedom, and I was willing to study, research, and dedicate my life in order to make that happen.
I've never had a father in my life who's properly supported me. You know, my real dad was alcoholic, abusive, runaway, never met him. My stepdad literally just gave up on me and gave up on me and my mom. I just remember day after day coming downstairs and just seeing my mom clip those coupons, and I just remember thinking no, this is not going to be my life. This is not going to be our life, and I just remember just instances where I felt so helpless, because I'm like, if I don't take care of my family, even though it's just me and my mom, no one is.
And that is how my pursuit of living a memorable life started. I knew I had to start small.
You know, when I came back to London, I really got serious and I looked at what goals I wanted to accomplish. I have 8 for this year, from the point at which I set it. One of them was to make 15,000. You know, just make 15,000. That doesn't mean have 15,000 in my bank account at the end of the year or whatever. Make 15,000 pounds in a year's time. I set that goal on the 19th, 11 days ago. And since then, I've made 514 pounds and 89 pence. So 11 days, 515 pounds. I'm on track. That is 1/30th of the way there in 11 days. So hopefully I can keep it up.
Now at first, I thought that becoming a bodybuilder would be my ticket to freedom. So I started a series called 16-Year-Old Bodybuilder. Now most people think I just created an online business and I hit my jackpot on the first run. And that could not be further from the truth. The truth is, for the longest time, I was just a guy who felt he had a lot of potential, but at the same time I had little to no success in life. I published 44 videos on my journey to becoming a teenage bodybuilder without making a single dime. Until eventually, by chance, I came across an opportunity that changed it all for me. 7th of August 2016. I signed my first client for my content creation agency at an astonishing rate of 95 pounds per week.
We got in contact with the owner. So the owner, the coach, and I had a conference call about me possibly running their social media. So that's confirmed right now.
So guys, I was just making an invoice for my first billable next week. Next week's basically when I start getting paid for my social media work with the football club I'm working with. I just find it so crazy, guys. You know, I'm creating invoices. I'm gonna get to a stage where I have to start, you know, paying taxes and filing tax returns. And I'm like learning all this stuff, and it's super cool that, you know, I'm learning this stuff at 16.
And that was a big epiphany moment for me. I realized that businesses would be willing to pay me a few $100s a month to create content for them. And I did some very simple math. If I had 10 clients paying me $500 a month, that would be more than most people make after graduating from university. And at that moment, I felt like I had just discovered a crack in the system. I have never felt so excited because I knew I had so much potential and it was just a matter of me putting in the work to get it done. But after a while, reality hit me. I tried to get another client for weeks, and weeks turned into months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and at this point, I was feeling miserable. I felt stuck. I felt like I had so much potential, but I simply couldn't turn that into real life results, even though I was putting in all the work, day in and day out.
It's 3 a.m. in the morning, so like content creation, it's way harder than you could ever imagine.
Now, if you've ever felt that, you know how frustrating it is. And the worst of it all, I felt like I was wasting valuable time in my life going to school and studying these pointless subjects.
I always struggled with formal education. It was something about just sitting down and learning stuff that I had zero interest in, zero passion in. I just struggled, and I just got more and more frustrated to the point where I couldn't take it anymore.
Time, which I could have been investing in my business. And that led me to the first big inflection point in my life. I vividly remember the day I was taking the tube at rush hour in London. You know, one of those classic humid, cold, heavy, rainy London days where everything just looks great. In fact, it was a day that was quite similar to how it is today, except when you're in a manor in the countryside, rain is nice, it's peaceful. When you're experiencing rain in central London in the tube, it is the worst place to be. The tube was packed with people coming from work. It was one of those days where you could smell the sweat mixed with that terrible smell of wet dog that people get from walking in the rain. And I would look at the faces of every person coming in and out of that tube. And I just remember seeing the frustration on their faces. How you could clearly notice that none of them wanted to be there, but they simply had no other choice to do so. And I remember how depressing it felt just being amongst those people, and how I never wanted to be like that when I grew up. And it was on that day, in that tube, that I took a decision. I refused to follow the same path as everyone else. And for the longest time, I actually don't know if I've ever told you guys this, but I actually used to have a photo of the London tube on a rainy day as the background of my desktop wallpaper. For me, it was a reminder that that wasn't the path that I wanted for myself. And funnily enough, that very same week, the 1st of March 2017, I signed my second client, 7 months after signing the first one.
Now, I'm actually going to be working with Athlete really closely in terms of content creation and building the brand. So there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff coming soon.
And at the end of the month, I took the decision that changed it all. It was the 28th of March, 2017.
And I'm happy to announce that today is the day where I have my last day at school. I'm officially the 17-year-old high school dropout. It's really scary, but hey, you just have to risk it.
Now, 45 days after that, I had signed 4 new clients and I actually hired my first employee.
So I've officially hired my first videographer. He is coming in from America in 2 weeks. And I think this month alone, I've signed like 4 new clients, and
at the end of the year, I moved out into my own $5,000 apartment in central London.
And yeah, guys, this is the main thing. I actually went to IKEA yesterday and picked this up. That table right there was actually the dining room table, and there was no desk, so I switched them around.
Now, it might look fast, but if you consider from the day I started, it took me almost 2 years to start making minimum wage money. The thing is, once I got there, getting to my financial freedom took only a couple more months.
Well, I mean, literally a year ago, I was in Amalfi Coast, Italy, with my ex-girlfriend and her family, and I remember the plane ticket was like £100 or something like that, and her family literally had to pay for it because broke as f***. Yeah. I mean, obviously, 2 dads who just kind of stepped out of my life entirely. My mom, single mom, unemployed, just looking back to a year ago, broke as f***. And then now, literally past 5 weeks, 5 major cities. Traveling's always just been a goal of mine, so that's crazy to think about.
And now, looking back on all of that, I've come to a realization. Up until that point, there was a single thing that was stopping me from leaving that mediocre life. It was the one common trend between every single one of the faces that I had seen on that tube on that rainy day. Now, remember what I told you at the beginning of the video? I'm not gonna give you the answers. Instead, I'm gonna give you the questions. You have to figure out the answers on your own when the right time comes. So, let me give you the first one. Do you know what's the thing that's stopping every single person in the tube that day from being truly successful in achieving freedom? Think about the answer. I doubt you'll get even close, but give it a shot anyway. If you are anything like me, you'll get more benefit from the thought experiment than the answer itself. But I will give you a spoiler. I'll tell you what the answer is not. You're probably gonna think that it's something along the lines of they didn't work hard enough, but the truth is, all the people in that tube were working fucking hard. The problem is, it doesn't matter how hard you work. It's not about working hard. Who am I to sit here and say that I worked harder than all of those people? Maybe I didn't. The problem was much deeper than that. Now, you may also say that the problem was that they lacked freedom, but that's not a problem. That's a symptom of it. It is a byproduct of having said problem. So anyways, we're gonna get back to this in just a minute, but where did I stop?
When you moved into your new apartment.
Yes. So at the end of the year, I moved out to my own $5,000 apartment in central London.
You know, I had just been getting into entrepreneurship I'd been in there for like 4 or 5 months sort of properly. And in April, I made I don't know if you can see that, £5,100 after tax. So that's roughly $6,500 after tax, that is. That was kind of like my starting point, and that was only 6 months ago. And then to get to where I am now. But one thing that I wrote down, which was quite interesting, is I actually wrote down that my ideal lifestyle, roughly 18,500 pounds. I don't know how well you can see that. 18,500 pounds is how much like my ideal like financial freedom, financial abundance would cost me. And I wrote that 6 months ago, and I thought, hey shit, like in 2-3 years I'll get there. And I made this actually much more than this last month. So 6 months later, and that's kind of an amazing feeling.
So, after 14 years, it's time to move, I guess.
First of all, I could never imagine this a year ago. If I could only tell you guys the amount of pain and hardship that I went through to get here, and how hard I had to fight for my own place. You know, I know people feel like a lot of people have excuses for themselves. And you know what, like, maybe, as I said, like, maybe your parents weren't great to you, or you know what, maybe you do live in a country where it's a bit harder, or like all of this stuff, like trust me, I know what that feels like, you know. Even to get this place, I'm 17 years old, and I came from a not so good place, whether that was sort of family things that went on, whether that was certain financial burdens at a young age. hanging around people that weren't that great for me. You know, I'm happy, you know, because this is my journey, this is my story, and I managed to make one of my little dreams come true, which was have a place to myself, have a place that I could call home, and that was a peaceful and just was a happy place for me. So this is hopefully going to be my happy place, guys, and I'm going to share every single step of the journey with you.
And that leads us directly to the second inflection point in my journey to freedom. You see, back in 2017, that was the first time I started hitting $10,000 to $15,000 per month consistently.
Anyways, the fact that I have a super hectic day, I have 4 meetings today, I have 5 meetings tomorrow, 6 of those 9 meetings are like literally go there, close a client for IG media.
And all of it was with my content creation agency. Now, sometimes I would even get flown out by my clients to shoot their content on location. Right now, I'm in Amsterdam. I've been here for roughly 10 days at this point, and I'm here for a huge business trip for my marketing agency, IG Media. Meaning, I was not only making life-changing money with my agency, I was also getting paid to travel the world while doing so. And that was a dream job for a lot of people. Get paid well, travel the world with all expenses paid, have a flourishing business. And to be honest, it was a dream for me for a long time. But for some reason, when I finally got there, it didn't feel like a dream. In fact, I was feeling more miserable than ever. I mean, you can even notice it in my voice in the clip.
So guys, this is a video that I've been thinking about making for a while. I'm actually in Berlin now, doing some work for my marketing agency, but yeah, just once again, recently, it's just something that's kind of came to mind now.
And how was that possible, you may ask? Well, I had to travel and be on location to fulfill the service of every single one of my clients. I spent more time doing unproductive things that I did not want to do, like committing from one place to another, than I spent time actually working on growing my business. At one point, I barely had time to go to the gym. I was making all of this money, but in the end, I was no different than every single one of those people on the tube. In fact, it was almost as if I was supposed to be living the dream, but instead, one of my worst nightmares actually came into reality. I had become exactly like the people on the tube, overworked, unfulfilled, miserable. Even though I was making money, I felt stuck. And I knew that in order to make more money and grow my agency even further, I would need to invest more time to fulfill more clients. But I was already at 100% capacity. There's no way I could have serviced more clients. And I tried hiring people to fulfill that work for me, but that didn't really end up too well either. I was seeing no way out. Now, how could it be that after living through everything that I lived through, all the struggles, I was feeling the most miserable when I was making $15,000 a month? That was literally what I had written down as my freedom number in my journal. That was my definition of success. That was my definition of freedom. And I had gotten there. And there I was, feeling more stuck than ever. And I can tell you from experience, there's nothing more frustrating and depressing than getting to the place you've always looked up to, only to realize that was never the answer. That was not what I expected. And that, my friend, is when I had my second big realization. I didn't really know what true freedom really meant. That was when I truly realized that only having money is not the answer, because you can have all the money you want and still be what I call a subordinate. A subordinate to your ordinary job, to your income, to your situation. I realized I didn't truly have a business. I had a job. And if you have a job, all you do at the end of the day is sell your time for money. And if you're selling your time, you're inevitably a subordinate. It doesn't matter how much you are selling it for. If you are not the one in control of your time, if you can't decide how you're going to use that time without external interference, by definition, you are a subordinate. And the outcome of being a subordinate is never freedom, no matter how hard you work. It can pay the bills, for sure. But at what cost? Is that the outcome you truly want for your life? To be a subordinate who will always dream of this false sense of freedom that you would never get to, no matter how much work you put into it. And I knew that's not what I wanted. I knew I couldn't settle for that. I knew how it felt to be a subordinate. The feeling of day after day having to go back and report to someone as if they're the ones holding the keys to your own life. And back then I used to tell myself I was successful because I was making $10,000 a month and I didn't have a boss. After all, I had 5 paying clients. But the reality was, inside it felt more like I had 5 bosses who had total control over my time. The truth is, I was just a glorified employee. I couldn't do the things I wanted because I needed to schedule my day around my clients' hours. I was not the one in control. I was a subordinate to my clients. It was almost as if the more money I made, the further away I felt from having control of my own life. The control to take my own decisions without having to care about what other people need or want. That feeling of not being in control was slowly eating me from the inside. And that is when I took a decision. And it was not an easy decision, by the way, but it was time to go back to the drawing board. Because what I was doing there, although it was paying me well, it wasn't working. So I decided to completely rip apart my content creation agency and basically start from zero. I went from making 10, 15, 20, sometimes even $25,000 a month in profit all the way down to zero. Now this time around, I did something different. I realized that the concept of freedom had changed. So I restructured my agency and I started from scratch with a new view of freedom in mind, focused on one thing and one thing only, achieving what I call the trifecta of freedom. That is financial sovereignty, geographical sovereignty, and sovereignty of time. I chose a service that allowed me to operate as a business rather than a glorified employee. And the results? Well, instead of telling you, I would rather show you.
Also keep in mind, last month I did $50,000 profit. So this time last year, I made 880 pounds, which is like, I made like 1.2K profit a year ago. And then a year later, I'm doing 50,000. But this year it looks like I'm on track to make $1 million, right? Last month was $50,000 of profit. You know, at the time of recording this, I'm only halfway through the month, and I think it's gonna be anywhere from 75 to 100,000. I honestly don't know. So I'm gonna go ahead and put up the same thing I put up on Instagram, which is my Stripe, my PayPal, and the date terms of it. I'm also gonna show my client invoices. So there's one on there for 9.5K plus VAT.
This time around, I chose a very specific service to deliver. First, it was a service that allowed me to deliver it without being on location with clients. So by default, it didn't matter what I did. Going into it, I already had geographical sovereignty. Now, some people think that you achieve geographical sovereignty, and that's a trap. You don't achieve geographical sovereignty. You either have it from the get-go or you don't, period. You won't magically achieve it as you make more money. Now, yeah, maybe you won't be able to work from a $5,000 a night Maldives resort yet because you lack the financial sovereignty to do so, but you do have the choice of working from wherever you want. That could be from your room, that could be from your kitchen, from the pool, from a coffee shop. Simply not having to go to an office or meet with clients is already the first step. So if you're working a job now that doesn't provide you with geographical sovereignty, I have good news and I have bad news for you. The bad news is this job that you're working will never provide you with geographical sovereignty. And if that's something you value, you need to make a change. Now, the good news is this is one of the easiest career shifts that you can start to transition while you're still working your current job. And that is exactly what we're gonna be covering in episode 2 on Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Now, the second thing this service allowed me to do was to easily outsource it to someone else. In fact, when I first started providing this service, I didn't even know how to deliver it myself. I learned along the way as I saw other people delivering it for me. And that provided me with a sovereignty of time that I never had up until that point.
95K with one employee, and that's it this month. So 95K, one employee, streamlined operations, and I work on my agency every week, 5 hours max.
For the first time in my life, I could make more money without having to do more work. And really think about that for a second. My worth was no longer linked to my time, which is the only way to truly stop yourself from being a subordinate. And just as important, my clients were willing to pay top dollar for this service.
It's funny, on my story I posted the other day, I had a 32,000 pound a Stripe payment come in. My Stripe fee for that I think was like almost £1,000, and so you could see, you know, how much was deducted. And tons of people were like, dude, like, can't believe you're paying like £1,000, you know, in fee to Stripe when they could have just bank wired you. To me, it's fine. I'm totally cool paying that because that brings up the likeliness of me signing a client exponentially that honestly, I just couldn't care less about the fee.
And I could charge this much because the value of this service was judged based on the results that I generated them. It wasn't based on how long I spent on shoot or how many videos or pictures that I delivered in a week, because all of those require you to invest more time if you want to get paid more. And that is how you get tricked into becoming a subordinate. Now, with this service, if I wanted to double the results I was generating them, I could easily do so with literally 2 clicks on my computer, with the exact same amount of work that it would take for me to generate half the results. And now that you know all of that, I want you to ask yourself the same question that I did that led me to truly understand what freedom means and got me to completely rip apart my agency and start from scratch. Right now, are you truly free or are you subordinate? Does your work make you free or does it make you a subordinate? And really think about that answer. And maybe it leads you to completely rip apart what you're currently doing so that way you can strive to become truly free as I did. And hopefully it will have as much effect on your life as it did on mine. And by the way, don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through the exact thought process to get to the answer to these questions in just a few minutes. Now, that takes us directly to the third inflection point. March 21st, 2020. That was the day and year that everything changed for me.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I feel as though we should address the elephant in the room.
As I mentioned, I ripped apart my 6-figure agency and started from scratch with the ultimate goal of achieving the trifecta of sovereignty: financial, geographic, and time sovereignty. But what I didn't truly grasp at that time was how much wealthier I actually was than pretty much all of the professionals that I used to look up to. Wildly successful lawyers, real estate agents closing multi-8-figure deals, even industry titans with hundreds of locations across the country. Now, how could I be wealthier than all of those 8- and 9-figure individuals back then? While all I did was simply own an agency. I mean, the math isn't mathing, right? And that is exactly the problem. Because just like you're doing now, I was judging wealth by the amount of money I had. And what COVID made me realize is that the definition of wealth has changed. You could have $10 million in your bank account and still be a subordinate. Because if you lack the time and geographical sovereignty, you're not truly wealthy or free anymore. You're still a subordinate to something or someone. Now that could be your job, that could be your boss, that could be your parents, that could be your business. It doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, a subordinate is a subordinate. And when COVID hit, I was enjoying my geographical sovereignty in Cape Town, one of my favorite cities in the world. But back then, I still had my residency in London. And a few things started to happen there that I didn't like. Back in London, I wasn't allowed to see my friends. I wasn't allowed to go to restaurants. I had to wear a diaper on my face. I mean, even one of my bank accounts that I had saved over £1 million got shut down, but I guess that's a story for another day. And simply said, it wasn't enough. So I decided to leave London for good.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I have officially left London, left the UK, and moved to a brand new country.
And I ended up spending a few months in Cape Town, really knuckling down, going through a monk mode period, and my agency was flourishing at that time.
Well, either way, I'm still gonna throw in a screenshot on top of that. Plus you guys got the email thread. So secured 5K today, billing them the rest of 5K next week. So yeah, it is Friday night, close another client. As I said, 10,000 upfront.
All right, amazing. Is there anything else that you need from us?
No, I think everything is clear. So.
Awesome. Yeah, all I can say is it's an honor to have you a part of the agency, and I really look forward to what we're gonna be able to do together.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
See you Monday. All right, thanks, guys. Talk soon.
Yes, sir. I felt smooth. I felt smooth that sales call.
I know what it is.
What?
It's the first one that is as early as this one, and you have a very different energy, resemblance, everything. We need to set them up all in the morning.
Yeah, I agree. In the mornings,
I'm excited. Lots of new clients, lots of good clients.
3 new clients in 24 hours. Let's get it. But yeah, I'm very, very happy. 3 closes in 24 hours. I got another sales call in an hour. Boom, 3 out of 3, baby.
And then finally, I moved to Dubai so that I could truly enjoy my sovereignty. Now, that's when it really got to me how free I actually was, because all of these people I used to look up to, the successful lawyers, the 8-figure real estate agents, businessmen with a lot of locations, they were kind of stuck. They couldn't move to another country if they wanted because they were stuck in their specific geographic location. The ultra wealthy doctor couldn't leave because he had patients to treat. The lawyer couldn't leave because his clients needed him now more than ever before. And the businessman couldn't leave because he lost his employees and had to fill in for them. Even without a boss, they were still subordinates to their own circumstances. So in my mind, the people with these types of money were the ones in charge. I thought they could do whatever they wanted because their money would allow them to. I thought their decisions didn't depend on anyone other than themselves, but it turns out I was wrong. Even with that level of wealth, they still weren't completely in control of their decisions. They weren't in full ownership of their lives and futures. In contrast, there I was, a 20-year-old that could do whatever he wanted, live wherever he wanted, without those decisions affecting my business and my financial freedom by a single cent. Listen, in the end, I was actually the only one who had full ownership of my life and the decisions without depending on any external factors. And that's when I realized times had changed. You could make a few $1,000,000 a year and still not be sovereign. On the other hand, you could be making as low as $10,000 a month, but have the trifecta of freedom: financial, geographic, and time sovereignty. In fact, I would much rather make $10,000 a month and have the trifecta of sovereignty than to make $1 million a year and be a subordinate who is not in control of his own life. And realizing that shift taking place in real time, it took me by surprise because it was something I'd never experienced in my own lifetime. And so I decided to go on a quest and figure out why the times we are currently living through were so different from the ones before. I decided to go back to the history books and study those big shifts in eras and why they happen and what are the ultimate consequences of those shifts and who ends up being the winners and the losers. I studied the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. I studied the Dutch and how they conquered uncharted lands across the oceans and then lost it all. I studied the Renaissance and most importantly, the American Revolution. And that is when I realized there's a much bigger story here that's not being told, that a lot of people are not yet seeing. One, which is being written right in front of our eyes. You see, throughout my research, I realized that all of these events always pointed back to the same place, to this one little known concept. And this concept seemed to always be lurking behind the scenes, influencing the dynamics of power and social hierarchy during the big shift in eras throughout history. This one concept really stuck with me, and after I started looking at the world events through the lenses of this one concept, it all really started to make sense. Now, if you haven't guessed yet, this concept is sovereignty. If you study history, you will see that sovereignty represents the ultimate authority of a state to govern itself, the supreme power to make decisions without external interference. By definition, it is a fundamental principle that underpins the autonomy and independence of a nation, ensuring its freedom to determine its destiny and protect the interests of its people. And what you need to understand here is the world is in constant transition of sovereignty powers. And some people call these transitions the changing world orders. If you approach these shifts and understand how the sovereignty dynamics change during them, you will see that there are always winners and losers. And whenever those big shifts happen, you do not want to be on the losing side. So let me tell you who those winners and losers are. Old world versus new world. You've probably heard these terms being thrown around before. Now, have you ever stopped to actually ask yourself what that means? Well, it turns out that the old world and the new world are the two outcomes of a change in sovereignty. And if you pay attention, you're going to see this pattern repeating itself throughout history. You can go all the way back to the fall of the Roman Empire. Old world, which was represented by the declining Roman Empire, a world of crumbling infrastructure and, to be honest, fading glory. You have citizens who lived in constant fear of invasion, struggling with rampant inflation and devalued currency. Then you had the legal system that became so corrupt and people were bound to their social classes with little hope for advancement. Then you had the New World, and here the winners were the church, the ones in charge of the emerging feudal system and the Byzantine Empire, emerging as a center of trade and learning, preserving much of Roman culture while developing new systems of law and governance. And then you had the Renaissance. You had the Old World, which was represented by the Dark Ages, constant wars, famine, ridiculing the man figure, shaming the ones trying to build wealth. And then you had the New World, which was represented by the Renaissance, a revolution in science, art, and commerce, one of the most prosperous eras of humankind. And then most recently, the American Revolution. You had the Old World, which was represented by the monarchical system of Europe, where economic opportunities were very limited. You had very little freedom, and your social status was mostly determined by birth. And then you had New World, which embodied the ideals of the American Revolution: democracy, individual liberty, and self-governance. A land of opportunity and freedom where it was possible for an individual to create his own success. And as you can tell, the people who stayed in the Old World, they got stuck into old paradigms, struggling for the rest of their lives, while the ones that made it to the New World got to experience levels of success, wealth, and freedom that weren't even thought possible in the Old World. And the more and more I look into these events, the more similarities that I notice the times we're living in today. If we go back to the American Revolution, the Americans were still a colony to the British colonial powers, and let's just say that life wasn't particularly good back then. Let me paint a picture for you here. The economic opportunities were extremely limited. I mean, most people were working low-level jobs with little chance for advancement. Moving up in society was extremely difficult, if not impossible for most. Most people were tied to their land or jobs, unable to seek opportunities elsewhere. Your social status was largely determined by birth. Currency devaluation and inflation were common problems. They had high taxes. Travel between colonies or to other countries required permissions and was costly. The political decisions and the ones in charge couldn't care less about how their decisions impacted your life. Economic policies favored British interests over colonial prosperity, and they were in constant threat of war with Native Americans, French, or other European powers. I mean, it was basically a life of very limited choices, restricted freedoms, and minimal control over one's destiny. And that is the ultimate reflection of the old world. After all, that is what being a subordinate means. You cannot take your own decisions without external interference, and you don't have the autonomy to determine your own destiny. And they were subordinates to the British colonial powers. Now, if you think about it, isn't that extremely similar to the exact world setting that we have today? You have most people who are still working low-level jobs with little chance for advancement. You have many people who are tied to their land or jobs, unable to seek opportunities elsewhere. You have currency devaluation and inflation, which are common problems. You have high taxes. Traveling to other countries is inaccessible for most people due to the high cost of it. The political decisions and the ones in charge couldn't care less about how their decisions impact your life. You have economic policies which favor big corporations' interests over the prosperity of its people. You have constant threat of war. You have changes in policy which could dramatically affect your life with little warning. And for most people, it is still a life of very limited choices, restricted freedoms, and minimal control over their destiny. But wait, there's more. Naturally, the American people, they weren't happy with the situation. I mean, they had a vision for a better world, a new world that they wanted to claim. And obviously, the British colonial powers were very against that. So they did a few things to retaliate. First, they tried to control the flow of information to the colonies. They actually enacted something called the Stamp Act of 1765. That act basically required all legal documents, newspapers, and pamphlets to carry a special stamp. And what that did in practice was it increased the cost of printing, which then limits the distribution of newspaper, which in practice meant reducing the spread of ideas that could criticize or challenge British policies and authority. It was a way to censor the challenging views against the ruling power. And if that wasn't enough, the British authorities would often censor or fully shut down colonial newspapers that were publishing anti-British sentiment. You actually had editors and publishers who could face arrest or even have their printing presses confiscated. And it's crazy because we actually see the exact same thing happening today with social media. The medium is different, but the intentions behind it are the exact same. We both know for a fact that certain topics get censored on social media, and posts that mention these topics often get their reach limited, which reduces the spread of those ideas. And by the way, that is exactly the same purpose of the Stamp Act of 1765. And then if you keep publishing about those ideas, what happens? Your account gets shut down, just like they used to do with the colonial newspapers. And then finally, if that's not enough, they just throw you in jail, just like they used to do back in the day. Now, the second thing that started happening is that the British colonial powers started taking decisions that affected the American colonies without their inputs. First, you see, the Stamp Act was also seen as a way to assert British authority over the colonies because it imposed a direct tax on the colony without their input. Basically, they were saying that they had the right to take decisions on your behalf that affect your life without any of your input. Isn't that the exact same thing that's happening today? And then you had tax increases, financial policies, data privacy issues, and so on, both from the government's end as well as from big corporations. And naturally, that fueled growing dissatisfaction towards the standing setting of the government back in the American colonies. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that all of these events led people in the colonies to see that the government didn't give a shit about them. The level of dissatisfaction reached its peak, which fueled the desire to create a new system of self-governance. Just like today, the dissatisfaction towards the government is at an all-time high, not in one particular country, but virtually across the entire world, and we are getting closer and closer to a tipping point. Now, if the situation back then and now are virtually the same, what does this all mean? Well, first of all, it means that there's got to be an old world and a new world. And that's the segue that leads us back to the unanswered question that I asked you at the beginning of the video. The realization I had years later, looking back at that day in the London Tube. Do you know what's the thing that's stopping every single person in the tube that day from being truly successful in achieving freedom? And after I understood the current world setting and compared it to similar events that happened in the past, I finally got to the answer. The problem was not that they weren't working hard enough. The problem was not that they weren't smart enough. They were working hard. They were probably just as smart as me, if not even more. Bear in mind, I'm a high school dropout. The problem was they were stuck in the paradigm of the old world. They were all subordinates. They all believed that if only they worked hard enough, they would eventually be granted with sovereignty. But as we know, it doesn't matter how hard they work. It doesn't matter how much money they accumulate. They will always be running the same race. They think that their work is going to eventually grant them with sovereignty. And that will never happen because sovereignty needs to be earned. And that illusion keeps them as subordinates for their entire lifetimes, just like the Americans who were once subordinates of the British colony. We're stuck in the same situation today. It doesn't matter what time in history you are. If you are stuck in the old world, the consequences will always be the same. You are going to be a subordinate. Now, if there's an old world, that means there also needs to be a new world where people achieve their sovereignty. Now, before I present you this new world, we need to get back to the 2 questions I asked you. Because remember, the truth cannot be told, it needs to be realized. So I wouldn't be doing you any favors by simply letting you know about this new world without first getting you to understand where you're currently sitting. So, that question is, today, are you a subordinate or a sovereign? Does your work make you free or does it make you a subordinate? It is essential that you reflect on that, because if you are a subordinate, you already understand where that's going to take you. If you're not sure, I'll give you a simple exercise to help you figure it out. Just think about all the decisions that you've taken in the last week. From the moment that you woke up to the moment that you went to bed. Out of all of those decisions you took, how many of those were actually your decisions that you took without any external interference, and how many of those were actually other people's decisions? Waking up at the time you woke up at, was that your decision or was that someone else's? Getting home the time that you got home, was that your decision or someone else's? What you had for lunch, was that your decision or was that someone else's? What about the clothes you were wearing, the car you were driving, or the transportation vehicle that you were taking? The content that you watched on social media, do you purposefully search for that content, or did that get recommended to you by the algorithms? Out of everything you did, how many of those decisions were truly, actually yours? And now you tell me, are you a subordinate or are you a sovereign man that governs himself and takes decisions without any external interference based on your best interests? As I said, I'm not going to give you any answers here. I'm giving you the questions so you can come up with your own answers. Now remember, history repeats itself. It is in periods of monumental changes that the once-in-a-lifetime opportunities arise. We are literally witnessing a new chapter of the history books being written right in front of our eyes, and we get to choose what this new chapter is going to look like. After all, if there is an old world, there needs to be a new world. Back in the American Revolution, after more than 169 years living as subordinates under British rulers, a few specific men got tired of having other people decide on their freedom without their input. They were tired of living as peasants under the control of rulers who did not represent their ideals. They, quite frankly, were tired of the old world, and instead, they wanted a new world. A land where a man could make his own work, where a man could benefit from the brilliance of his own mind and the strength of his own muscles, the might of his own will, and they were determined in turning this vision into reality. And throughout this determination, a new type of man arose. They were called sovereign men. The sovereign men pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible in terms of freedom, opportunities, meritocracy, and individual autonomy by creating a land of opportunity and freedom. These sovereign men led to a new era, a new world. They created a reality where it's finally possible to pursue new industries and innovations without British constraints. They made merit-based advancements real. Your birth wasn't the deciding factor on your level of success anymore, and that is why the concept of the self-made man emerged. They made it possible for regular people to travel between states freely and settle into new territories. They created a culture that celebrated and rewarded individual initiative and risk-taking, and they made people, for the first time, believe in progress and the ability to shape their own destiny. The sovereign men put an end to the old world and led the way to an era where for the first time, regular people could become sovereign. For the first time, the people had supreme power to govern themselves and make decisions without external interference. Wouldn't that be a sight? Living in a world where you can have supreme power to govern yourself and make decisions without external interference based on your own interest and determine your own destiny. Listen, If you aspire that, this might be one of the most important messages that you're going to hear in your lifetime. Because right now, we could be on the verge of breaking into a world just like that. Follow me for a second. Do you see all of the parallels between what happened back in the American Revolution and what is happening right now? Those are the signs of an incoming change in sovereignty. So listen, there is a crack in the dam. We are on the verge of a new shift in sovereignty where the paradigms of the old world are going to be redefined and surpassed. And a major social change will take place. Not only that, the ones that get to this new world are going to experience one of the most prosperous eras modern day society has ever experienced. A lot of riches will be created, and the average guy will have the same amount of opportunities and luxuries that only kings had just a few centuries ago. I call this new era digital sovereignty. The digital revolution now allows us to achieve our own individual sovereignty without having to rely on the old system anymore. And if you don't believe me, just look around you. Tell me this isn't literally what is happening right now. If you look around, everybody making it big in their 20s today, what are they all doing? They all have an online business. They created an app or a software business. They created their wealth. Maybe they created their wealth with crypto, or they had a high income skill that made them money online. Every single young man today in their 20s who created their own fortunes did it through the digital world. It's almost as if they're all finding success in this alternative reality where the regular rules of the game just simply don't apply, where you don't have to spend decades working your way up to a good salary in a big corporation, where you don't need to spend half a decade going to college and being a subordinate to teachers, bosses, etc. This entire wave of new sovereign men are all finding success in the digital realm, which is literally the new world that is being created in front of our eyes. And by the way, this wasn't here 15, 20 years ago. And the thing is, most people, they just haven't realized it yet. They haven't realized that this world exists and that they do have a choice. We are at a transition period leading up to this big shift in sovereignty. I mean, just think back to the American Revolution. That did not happen overnight. The Stamp Act was in 1765 and the Declaration of Independence was adopted in 1776, 11 years later. It took over a decade. That was their transition period. And that's exactly what we're living through right now. I mean, really think about it. 10 years ago, it was not possible for the average Joe to leap into this new world. Today, it is. And those that take advantage of it will experience a fast ascent into the social hierarchy like never before seen in mankind. They will enjoy the spoils of a shift in eras. And different to past revolutions, for the first time in history, it doesn't depend on an entire nation to come together and overthrow a ruler and claim for independence. Today, you can claim your own individual sovereignty without having to depend on anyone else.
Nowadays, you have zero excuses. If you have internet and a phone, you know, you can start your personal brand, you can start your business, you can travel, you can see the world. Like, there's nothing you can't do on an iPhone or any phone for that matter nowadays.
And now you have the option to renounce on the traditional old system, becoming a renegade and joining the digital world, just like I did back when I was 15. And if you haven't noticed, this entire episode was my own story of me leaving the old world and discovering this new world of digital sovereignty and how I got there.
Basically, my ideal situation would be having my own studio, sitting there in my studio with all the perfect lighting.
I honestly can't tell you how many years I've waited to make this video. I'm not talking about an idea I had for a few weeks or a few months. I'm talking years I've been waiting for this moment.
Recording snippets of my day and then talking about this happened and then showing the clips, this happened, etc., etc. So we're making like a story out of my day.
So our week pretty much included a lot of boat days and a lot of lunches. A lot more boat days and then even more lunches. And I was pretty present, to say the least. And I got some good runs in to sweat off the food, as well as maybe a couple tequila shots here and there. But then the next day I found myself on another boat with more lunches. Oh, and we also bumped into Steve. You remember Steve, don't you?
That's why we travel to all these places. But we see all our clients here. And this is my next client.
It would be awesome to take this thing, and who knows, like maybe one day when like I get really big and everyone's like, that's so cool, I want to be on your vlog. Then I can bring this in. It could be super cool.
What's up? Moving different today. Alright, how you doing? Good to see you, bro. Feels good to be with you, man. We're gonna have a crazy
What's up, brother? So good to see you.
We are now living in an era where you don't have to go to work because you can work from anywhere.
Yeah, it's funny, like a lot of time people think that, you know, running a $45,000 a month agency, you know, and have this swanky office and this thing and that thing, and no, like I literally just work in that office. That office is what pumps out $45,000 a month on average profit with my agency.
You don't have to clock in at 9 o'clock in the morning because you can wake up and work at the time that you want. Whether that's 10 a.m., 3 p.m., 2 a.m., that's your choice. And for the first time in history, it is realistic for someone in their 20s to make enough money to become truly free.
So I've just made my first $1 million profit by the age of 18.
Really think about it. Before the internet, how the hell would you achieve the trifecta of freedom? That was a perk that was only reserved to the noble, to the kings, to the individuals with unimaginable wealth. How the hell would you do that even 30 years ago? And the conclusion here is very simple. If you are not on the internet, you are missing out. You are missing out on this whole new world of opportunities and freedom. The world of digital sovereignty. The sovereign men of the American Revolution fought a war to achieve as a nation a fraction of what is possible for the average dude to achieve by himself today. I mean, think about how pissed they must have been with the old world, to a point where they were willing to risk it all. They were willing to risk their lives, their families' lives, their land, all in the name of conquering their sovereignty, which still doesn't even come close to the levels of sovereignty you can have today by simply making $10,000 a month working remotely from your computer. And if that is not enough to get you pissed off that you are still stuck to this old world and missing out on this huge opportunity that is digital sovereignty, knowing that your ancestors fought entire wars, went on life-defying expeditions across oceans, building entire nations just to get a glimpse of that level of sovereignty that you can have today. If that doesn't get you fired up, I don't know what will. And just like during the American Revolution, the people who fought for the new world became sovereign. During the digital sovereignty, the people who took a leap of faith and jumped into this new world will too become sovereign men. History repeats itself, and we are now at an inflection point that could take one of two turns. Either, just as the pioneers of the American Revolution faced a choice between remaining under British rule or fighting for independence, you now must choose between remaining tethered to an outdated system or declaring your own digital sovereignty. And those who stay in the old world will find themselves left behind, struggling in an increasingly challenging and restricted world. But those who embrace the new world of digital sovereignty will become the architects of their own destinies, enjoying the levels of freedom and prosperity that were unimaginable just generations ago. And just like with the American Revolution, there's one catalyzing event that marks the final stage of the revolution, the leap into the new world. In their case, it was the Declaration of Independence. And in your case, you need an action to represent that leap, to declare your transition from old world to new world. Mine was the moment that I showed you at the beginning of the video when I dropped out of high school. For me, that was a big decision. That meant revoking everything my mom had worked for her entire life. I mean, listen, that woman is a superhero. I was raised without a father. My biological father was an alcoholic abusive. When I was born, my mom worked 3 jobs. My grandparents took care of me. Eventually, we ended up moving to London when I was 4 years old, and things looked like they were on the up. Things looked like they were about to turn into a dream, and that dream very quickly turned into a nightmare. And when I was 11 years old, my stepdad cut off me and my mom, and we were plunged back into the same situation I was in Russia. But the one thing she sacrificed everything for was my education. So you need to imagine everything that she had been working for her entire life, her dream of, okay, I'm gonna give him this education and that will be my one gift to him. I threw it all away. I never finished school. I have no diploma, I have no certificates, I have nothing. I gave up all of that because I knew deep inside that there was something better waiting for me, waiting for us in the new world. Giving up on what she had sacrificed her entire life to provide for me was my Declaration of Independence. But nonetheless, it was not an easy decision for me, and it might not be an easy decision for you either. Whatever that Declaration of Independence means for you, it will probably be a difficult one, but you gotta take that decision. It is the only way. So if you are ready to take a leap into the new world and to leave the old world behind, on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, on episode 2, I'm going to show you how. So ladies and gentlemen, honestly, sometimes watching back over these clips and watching back over my story, it makes me emotional. I became the hero of my own story, and I can't wait for you to become the hero of yours.